Friday, I had the pleasure of attending another celebration of life, and that being the life of Lillian Dixon. And Lillian was a member here for way more years than I can remember. And Lillian was a very small lady, quiet, soft-spoken, very humble, and at a glance, you could say that Lillian was very common, perhaps. But she wasn't. She possessed a quality that I found to be quite uncommon and extraordinary. When you walked up and talked to Lillian, you immediately had her complete, full, undivided attention. No distractions. She engaged her entire self into your conversation. She would listen intently to every word that you said, and she would never have a judgmental response unless you asked her for her opinion. She merely encouraged you if you were about to do something. And the thing that I found truly extraordinary was that she accepted you. You knew it. When the conversation was over and you looked at her, she accepted you for exactly who and what you were and were not. Total acceptance. So this uncommon, extraordinary quality that Lillian had, I call engagement. She was completely engaged with you when you were in her presence. I've been watching people a long time. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I've noticed that most everybody wants to be heard. And they want what they say to be interesting. But if you give that some thought, in order to be interesting, whatever you say requires that you first engage yourself in something that you are interested in. And did you ever notice the people that were very interesting? It was because they knew something you didn't. They had experienced something that you didn't. And when they shared something that they became interested in, their talk was interesting. And I've watched, and I'm guilty of this as probably more so than any person in this room. Instead of listening to someone for the purpose of engagement or learning something, don't we all listen to somebody's story, and the first thing that pops in our head, I can outdo that. I had an experience that was way top that. I can say something funnier or more clever than they just said. We weren't engaged at all. We were just looking for another opportunity to be heard, to be funny, to appear interesting. Engagement. February. We discussed that. And both of those ladies are here. A couple of weeks ago, Marjorie and Vivian weren't here. And I said, well, it's February, right? And everybody agreed. And I said, no, there are two ladies here that would quietly on the QT remind me that it is pronounced February. And those two ladies would be, and they would do that for me to better myself, to appear more intelligent and more learned and more educated. And those two ladies are Marjorie and Vivian. And neither one of them happened to be here, so we had a great chuckle at your expense. But February, I think, presents us all with enough challenge or material for each one of us to be engaged strongly for the rest of our lives. Just this month, February 14th, the day we celebrate loving and being loved. Didn't start out that way so good. Another school shooting. I don't even want to talk about it. Everybody's talking about it. Same old story. It's the same story over and over again. I want to look at the first quote on our order of service. The greatest win is walking away and choosing not to engage in drama or toxic energy at all. I don't want to talk about the school shooting. But if you want to talk about finding a way, finding a solution, finding a course of action whereby we can help people learn that force and violence is not a solution to any problem, let alone every problem. If we want to get together and figure out a way to, I don't know, make people think about what's good for all of us, count me in. If we want to sit down and have discussion and do some work in figuring out a way that we can get the media in the world to focus its attention on what's going on that's good for humanity, that uplifts humanity, that improves the living conditions for humanity, instead of focusing on the crap and the toxic and the drama. Count me in. I'm in for the long haul engagement. Talk about long haul engagement. February is also Black History Month. I look at that, when I look at Black history, I think of two words come in my head: the agony and the ecstasy. The agony that people that have been repressed by society for their ethnicity, for their color, for their religion, for their nationality, for centuries, the agony that they have lived through. But because of people's engagement in finding a solution, things have changed. In 150 years, things have changed dramatically and drastically. On one hand. On the other hand, they haven't changed much at all. You know, I mentioned a few weeks ago, I was telling a story. Back in the 60s, when I was in the Air Force, my best friend in the whole world was a black guy named Tom Ashcraft. He was killed in an airplane accident. And I've always had very strong feelings and tried to be engaged in bringing about equal rights for my fellow human beings. But something occurred in my life 16 years ago. I'm a white guy. I've always had a life of privilege. I've complained about how hard and tough it was, but I didn't have to look around, and I was always aware of the injustice and the inequity. But then 16 years ago, my youngest daughter started having children, started having a family. She's had 4 children, the oldest being 16. All 4 of those children had black fathers. Equality, hatred, racism. I've come to take that very personally. And I try to stay very engaged in what might bring about a positive change and a better life for my 4 grandchildren and the other 4 billion grandchildren that are out there that are the recipients of discrimination and hatred and made to feel less than, inferior. It's a long, long process. I watched a special the other night. It was a documentary about Muhammad Ali. And Martin Luther King made a statement on that. You know, you may not share his religious beliefs, but you have to admire this man for his courage. He stood up for his beliefs. And look at all the people, I can't begin to name them all, that have been engaged in bringing about equality and better living conditions for people of color, of any minority. And it's a long, long process. But they have been committed to being engaged and thinking, and they never stop trying new avenues of engagement. I'd like to read along with me to Dr. King's quote, the middle one. Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. We have to think about this. It's easier to just be entertained. It's easier to just to stay with the old decisions and responses that we've had. How's that working out for us? How's that working out for our society? Nothing's going to change until we engage, every one of us. Something to think about? Let's read this last quote by Joseph Campbell. We are so engaged in doing things to achieve purpose of outer value that we forget about the inner value, the rapture that is associated with being alive. That's what it's all about. We get so engaged and so intent on, I gotta get a new car. And somehow we find a way to do that. Gotta get a better house. Somehow we find a way to do that. But I want a better life. I want things to be better for all of the black and brown and Asian children in this universe. We're too busy with other things. How come is it we're so hesitant to engage in the very thing that will improve our lives, the quality of our life from the inside out? Every one of us is here on that quest, or you wouldn't be here. Just trying to offer things that will get you to think. Think. I opened this morning talking about, if you want to see your life change, you have to engage in learning more things, expanding your awareness and your understanding. I don't know how many times in my life I've never gone to a 12-step meeting. But that's serenity prayer. That is so valuable. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Ask those questions of your inside, of your inner workings. Part of us we truly should accept. And some of us had a lot of trouble accepting our very own self. But we do have the courage, we possess the courage to change those things that we want to change. And we have the divine wisdom within each one of us to know the difference. In a little while, we're going to sing, "Let There Be Peace on Earth." I'll tell you honestly, that's not going to happen unless a lot of us engage ourselves in figuring out ways to make that happen. Engage ourselves in making those changes inside of our very own person to bring about more peace right here first. It can't spread. Nobody can catch this thing called peace if we don't have it within us to share. Will you stand up and sing that song this morning? I encourage you to think about the engagement required to bring about peace on this earth. When you hear about all the drama, all the toxic stuff going on, all the horrible things, perhaps we could think about something, not the grossness of it, but ponder the solution. What's the reaction? Same old song of, oh, that's so sad, so terrible. Yeah, we know that. Same songs played over and over and over again. We have the power to make that change a little bit. If we show the tenacity to engage, it's not going to happen overnight. Look at the people who have engaged themselves. John Lewis, Ali, King, Brown, Carmichael, Malcolm, Van Jones. And there's a list of thousands who have made the commitment to engage their thoughts, their time, their talent, their thought, and their treasure in making a positive difference in the living conditions on this planet. I'm going to ask you to think about something as you're singing, "Let There Be Peace on Earth." As you walk outside, consider this. Your engagement will be the future we leave for the generations ahead. Your level of engagement is the only shred of hope for the young people of this world. That not only makes it sacred, makes it pretty darn important.
I have to speak up. This morning, I heard the children of that school commit themselves to a demonstration on March 24th in which they will engage the whole nation of teenagers. They said, if you adults don't do it, we will. That's engagement.
That is engagement. Maybe we could learn something from these kids, folks. Maybe we could. Take a deep breath, please. Now, how about a little sigh? I'm done talking now. It's time for you to sing.